Right. So I've been kind of wary about doing anything for TV since then.
Wow. I can't say as I blame you, and I'm more interested in the as I say, the forensics, the actual evidence and the stories here than any sort of
Right.
media spin or anything. That's one of the reasons that we started this show, and we've gotten a good response actually around the world so far from people that are interested in kind of a frank and common man's perspective, if you will, rather than getting too deep into some of this stuff and getting to the point where we're spewing our own beliefs out. We'd rather just reach out to some of the real experts and talk to them. So let me get back to the sort of a mix here. The ancient texts, as well as some of the technology. One of the people that I'm very interested in interviewing, and I haven't had the chance yet, is a guy by the name of William Henry. He's also got another gentleman, Mark Gray, that works with him. You may also be familiar from the Exopolitics Institute with someone by the name of Michael Sala. And all of these people, and as well as others, seem to believe that there was some tie back to the Middle East, back to Saddam Hussein a little bit, and I'm afraid I'm tying this as tightly as I can to the Nazis. With this alien technology, with Stargates, with possibly the invasion of Iraq in 2003 being tied secretly to a search for this type of stuff, do you think that there's any real connection there? And have you, in dealing with Dreamland and others, I'm sure this topic has come up, that they were out looking for that type of thing, and that maybe Saddam Hussein and by extension possibly the Nazis, are either looking for this technology or have it?
Well, as a matter of fact, I cover that question in a number of my books. I touch on it very briefly in Secrets of the Unified Field. I mention it again towards the end of a book called The Cosmic War, which is kind of the keystone in the arch of all of my books. It's kind of the thing that ties them all together. But yes, I do think that there is a connection, and the reason I say that is it's a matter of historical record. I get into this in the Nazi International, that Nazi intelligence was extremely well organized and well penetrated into the Iraq region during the war. In fact, they actually helped stage that coup that the British later had to go in with military force and put down. The German presence, the post-war German presence in Saddam Hussein's Iraq was very, very heavy, to the point, that the Germans built all of his bunkers. They were the ones supplying him with his uranium enrichment technology, and it was the Germans that were keeping the field catalogs of their archaeological digs that they were doing for Saddam Hussein. So, there is definitely a connection there, and I think, yes, absolutely, someone is looking for something.
That is incredible. And do you think that presence, despite the American invasion, Allied invasion, whatever they want to refer to it as, do you think that presence is still there, or were they perhaps chased out? Or
no. The German Bundesnachrichtendienst, which is kind of their kinder, gentler Gestapo, is what I like to call them. But their intelligence service, the WMDs, has a very, very heavy human on-the-ground intelligence presence inside Iraq to this day. So, yeah, they're still there.
Do you think this creeps across the border into Iran?
Yes.
Just the potential for some of these concepts is just a little too much for most people to absorb, I think. But there's just too much evidence there. And then much more deeply into the ancient texts here. We'll wrap up in just a minute, but I want to touch on really somebody that completely changed my perspective on all of this once and for all. Once I read all of his books, was Zecharia Sitchin. His work into ancient texts. I don't know if your field of patristics takes you far enough back into the same material that he references in a lot of his material, but I'm just wondering if you could comment on Sitchin. I know that you've touched on him in a couple of your books, at least indirectly, and I'm wondering if you could touch on Sitchin and his work.
Actually, I touch on him very directly in The Cosmic War. Sitchin, I have a number of problems with Sitchin, and the first of them would be his translations in some cases from Sumerian and Akkadian particularly. But I do in The Cosmic War cite the same texts that he only either mentions very cursorily or cites in very small portions. I cite the actual texts in their entirety. And moreover, I make the case from these texts that yes, there is certainly a technology in play, there's certainly a physics being described, but the texts that I'm using to make my case are texts that are standard academic translations. Okay, so in other words, I'm so to speak covering my you-know-what.
Yep.
Because I'm not coming up with my own translations. I'm relying on other established translations by scholars in the field to make my case. This is another of my big problems with Sitchin. I have a lot of problems with him, but by the same token, I have a lot of respect for the man because he did really raise the issue of technology in ancient times from the texts in a major way and in a comprehensive way. So, take my criticism with a grain of salt because, on the other hand, it's balanced by some healthy respect for what he's done.
Sure. And, in the same vein, I mean, would you consider Von Daniken to be maybe a little bit more of just a pop version of what Sitchin was trying to do?
Yeah, I would. Between the two, if I were to tell people read one or the other, I'd say definitely read Sitchin. But then I'd have to add even to the caveat, if you're going to go down that route and look at ancient texts as suggestively containing ancient technological and scientific references, then read my book, The Cosmic War, because I think I do a fairly thorough job in terms of the modern scientific literature of interpreting some of those texts.
Right. Let me try to wrap up with two more questions, one of which is one of my favorites for our guests. But of the people that you're currently maybe reading or researching, I was wondering if you could maybe give us a glimpse into what's on your bookshelf and what's right on your desk right now. What kind of material are you really into and researching, and who are the people that you're really trying to track with at the moment?
Well, I'm always rather wary of doing that because the stuff I write about is kind of dangerous, and I've had so many strange things happen to me since I started this line of inquiry that I just generally don't talk about what I'm doing as my current book project until it's actually in a publisher's hands. As far as what's on my bookshelf in a general way, I can tell you that I have a lot of mathematics books. I read a lot of physics papers that I pull up off of online. I do a lot of reading in ancient texts, ancient history. I'm very eclectic.
Sure. That's a fair answer. My favorite question to ask guests, too, I just think this is one of the funniest things. It was one of the first ones I ever came up with, so I throw it at everybody. At some point, years ago, there would have been a young Joseph Farrell, little Joe, running around kicking a ball or building with blocks or whatever. I'm wondering at what point maybe you stopped and this type of thing started to capture your imagination, and how would that have happened? How did you go from maybe being a little kid or an adolescent to suddenly turning into the person that you are these days?
Well, I'll be very blunt and honest. What did it for me, I was 6 years old, homesick from school on Friday, November 22nd, 1963. So, I saw the Kennedy assassination happen.
Wow.
And that left a major imprint on me. And a year later, of course, when the Warren Commission came out and they excerpted the magic bullet theory in the newspapers across the country, of course, even a 7-year-old kid can tell you that bullets just don't do that.
That's exactly right.
So that kind of started it for me. I've always been fascinated with the Kennedy assassination ever since that point. The other thing that did it was, I have always been fascinated by the Great Pyramid. My father was an engineer, and he talked about the amazing properties of the structure when I was a kid growing up. And one year on vacation, I was 13 or 14 years old, I believe. We were going across North Dakota, and we saw the old anti-ballistic missile phased array radar. sitting out there in the middle of nowhere, which, looks like a pyramid with the top half of it lopped off. And I thought, well, gee, that's interesting. I wonder if the pyramids in Egypt had some sort of military function, and that kind of lodged in my brain. And then Zecharia Sitchin, of course, published The Wars of Gods and Men, in which he talks about pyramid wars and cites some ancient texts to the effect that these things were used as weapons of some sort. And then, of course, Sitchin being Sitchin, in some cases, he comes up with these amazing observations and then just drops them.
Yes.
He doesn't pursue them.
Yeah.
So I decided to pursue that, and then, of course, Christopher Dunn published his Giza power plant book, which really piqued my interest. So that kind of got me started in the ancient technology and history sort of area of research.
That's great. I could probably do 10 interviews in a row with you. I know you had said you were up doing some other research and all that, and we're going to let you go, but I really appreciate having you join the show, and we would love to have a chance to talk to you again.
Sure.
Refer everybody to GizaDeathStar.com and go to Amazon or wherever else you can to find Dr. Farrell's books. Dr. Joseph Farrell, we really appreciate you joining us on Time and Space. Thank you for your time. We'd like to speak to you again sometime soon.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Are we off?
We are, yes. Yeah, sure. Call him right back. I apologize.
Dr. Farrell.
Hi, it's Mike Smith again. My producer reached over and hit the switch immediately to cut you off. I just wanted to say thanks very much for the interview.
That's all right. I figured it was an automatic cutoff or something. I just was going to ask you if you'd do me a favor and shoot me the link to the show when it's up online so that I can kind of listen. I always like to listen to it and can do these little self-criticism things.
I've probably, as I say, I've probably got 100 other questions I could go to, but I wanted to at least get an hour down and get a few questions out there. But yeah, we like to reference other interviews that have been done too. We're not so sort of self-absorbed that we only want people to hear our shows and our interviews. We try to give a broad spectrum. So we'll probably include some other clips and things like that. But yes, absolutely, I'll send you some info. And again, thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate it.
Okay, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Sorry about that.
That's great. I got to use the follow-up call at some point there, so that is super. No, listen, and this is, like I said, this is one of these interviews that I could have easily kept the guy on for 2-3 hours and tried to really dissect it, but, it's just, some of these interviews, it's just too difficult, and I'd rather kind of nail down, a couple of different books and areas instead of a wide survey like that, so that's great. Okay, so concludes the interview with Dr. Joseph Farrell.